welcome one and all to tonight's episode of Start With You, the podcast which has a conversation with an incredible mind in our space. And that's the purpose of this show, y'all. And I brought on an incredible producer that I've had the privilege of knowing now for a very long time in our space. Eddie, how are you doing? How are you?
I'm great. It's really good to be here with you. An hour spent with you is a good hour, John.
Oh, shucks. I feel like we've had many hours, but here's the thing. I was joking just before the show that effectively, like, we're the gray hairs of this industry at this point. We are definitely the I don't know what's the best way to say it. Like, we're the guy who sits on the porch and shouts at the youngins trying to come in, like, hey.
It feels that way. It's interesting because like we're the gray hairs shouting to the kids, but we're also like the gray hairs shouting to like the other gray hairs outside of our industry, trying to tell them, hey, the kids are actually over here. You know, that's where you want to be.
They're like, and they're always confused by that. They're like, wait a second, so what app are they on? Actually, let's talk a bit about that. The wonders of the traditional circuit and what they give to us. I feel like half of our jobs is trying to convince them that digital is a thing. Because for some reason, this concept of linear television is still all they know, and that's all they're willing to accept. So I don't know, is it a matter of they're afraid of change? Like, based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's TV was very gradual change, right? Yeah. TVs and movies are gradual changes. Now, inside the confines of a movie theater or on a TV screen at home, you can make changes to that format. You can make the TVs bigger and nicer and sound better, and that's all great. But I think there was a genuine there was a breaking point when it's like, no, but it's not TV. It's on these little screens here, and then even these smaller screens here. And I think that, for me, seemed to be there was like a quality thing. And if you look at the history of TV, movies looked down on TV for a long time, to where if an actor started to do too many TV roles, it's like, well, you're just a TV actor now. Or if you're a TV director, good luck trying to be a movie director. And nowadays it's very fluid. We'll get there eventually with digital, but probably in like another 5 years. Like, if I'm being real.
I mean, I was thinking even longer, just based on the experiences I've had. But as you were highlighting, I think it is that quality component. Because now I'm reflecting on it, that what you highlighted in terms of the movie actor eventually going to television, they're like, oh, then the movie career is done. But it's so interesting to me that I thought there were going to be a moment at the start of quarantine when we saw, like, you know, Conan O'Brien was forced to start creating in formats that we've been producing now for many years. And there still was this quality expectation where they're like, well, no, that's Conan, though, when creators are creating a higher quality than even his show at that point from our digital circuit.
Right. I think like we as media, everybody being a media consumer, I think we want the media that we consume to feel bigger and out of reach than what we feel capable of. You know what I mean? So I started my career as an editor, and I came aboard editing right when nonlinear editing software was just starting to become like a mass product. Like,
so for our listeners, real quick, because those who may not have grown up on earlier like linear stuff, like are you talking about like the advents to like the Final Cut Pros, the introductions of Premiere, stuff like that?
I started editing when Final Cut, like before Final Cut 1 dropped. So like this was like, so nonlinear editing in those days was exclusively to the Avid or like the Media, like in film school, like we were learning Media 100. That was and Premiere as well. Premiere, the original Premiere before Creative Suite, like these were still high-end tools, but like not prosumer level, right? You had to shell $1,000 or $2, but you didn't have to like put a second mortgage on your house to buy one. Whereas a high-end Avid system, you did. Those high-end Avid systems in post-production were routinely $40,000 to $60,000. You know, because there was hardware involved that you had to buy and calibrate, and not just the computer component. So I came in right at that time where no, you could actually just scrape your nickels together and make some content. And so I say all that to say that when Conan started doing that stuff, it felt too, it's like, well, I can do this. This is a Zoom call. Like I feel like as consumers, we want the thing we're watching to feel slightly out of reach. Even high-end streamers, even like I look at your setup and you've got cool stuff I don't have. We have these cool mics and whatnot, but I don't have a stormtrooper helmet. I don't have like a room dedicated. I have a skateboard deck that's Star Wars.
Hell
themed,
yeah!
I don't have. Yeah, actually, let me see if I can pan up. That's it's a skateboard deck. It's Leia, but it's a mock-up of the Endless Summer poster.
Oh, I love that.
It's like, but it's Leia and Tatooine, so it's like
it was just off cam for the viewers, but it is a beautiful silhouette piece. It's a red board with a black silhouette on it.
Yeah.
But what you were highlighting there is it's almost, I hate to say classist, but it's almost like that. Like when we're talking to traditional outlets, it's just like, oh, well, unless you have the skills of and the knowledge how to operate my hardware or to ingest through our systems, you are therefore a lesser being. And I'm purposely keeping you there so you never take my job. So when they see digital creators coming up through and have advanced systems and they're being forced kind of into our ecosystem right now, it's almost like there's a threat.
Yes, you're 100% right. I'm extraordinarily lucky. Because like I said, I started as a documentary filmmaker, and my day job career was in post-production. I did my internship at a company called Buna Murray Productions, which is most famously known for The Real World, The Road Rules, and nowadays, like Kardashians, they did Project Runway for a long time, all those shows. I did not to date myself, I worked on season 9 of the original New Orleans season of Real World, and I was an intern. I was doing what most interns do, which is just get coffee and shuffle papers and whatnot. But I made it clear from jump, like, no, I want to be an editor. This is what I was editing a documentary at the time. I'd filmed an independent documentary, and I'm like, no, I need the reps. And there was a editor there who's now the senior vice president of post-production there, by the name of Mark Rodanis, and he's a very modest man, so he'll not like that I'm bringing this up. But he actually took me under his wing, and he had me sit in the chair, and he would ask me questions as he was cutting, and he was like, no, you get this, so I'm gonna teach you what I can in the summer that I have you. And he was very much of a train your replacement, get the next generation ready, throw the ladder back down, throw the rope back down. And and by the end of my internship, I was cutting scenes. I cut 2 scenes on Real World season 9, which for an intern was unheard of. I cut bumpers for a reality show called Making the Band, which was the O-Town show. I used to do I did 3 coming up bumpers on that.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, we're definitely dating ourselves here, but it was beautiful to have in that moment of okay, I'm trying to, I'm breaking into the industry. Obviously, taking the gig that most people hear is oh, you got to be the intern, you got to work the mailroom. That's kind of the understanding that's often pitched, either going to film school or from any other backgrounds. That's how you break into entertainment. Yeah. But there's the other factor that people don't often bring up is if you get that gig, the purpose is for you to then network towards what you actually want. Otherwise, they'll never move you. And so you found a person with this editor to push you forward.
I did. And then, but I didn't stay exclusively there. So one of the other interns that season was a guy by the name of Russell J. He and I were the same age, but I was in the military prior to college, but so he graduated a year before me. So he was done with school. And so he got a job as a PA right out the gate. I waited another year to graduate college. Russell J is still an executive producer there now. He show ran multiple seasons of Kardashians. He stayed almost exclusively there, and he came up through that system. Me, I wanted as many experiences as I could, and so I bounced around and I did the freelance thing. I went back to Buna Murray a few times. I did a few shows there over the years. But I never wanted to just stay in one spot. I needed that, diversity of content, diversity of experiences to in order for me to come up. And as you say, build those relationships. Cause as we know, this is a relationship business. I don't like the phrase, well, it's who you know. It's well, it's who you know, but it's who you make stuff with and who remembers you. And you can work with somebody once and then not hear from them, and then 4 years go by, and then you're their first call because in that something very specific comes up, and it's well, this guy was good there, or this person was good here, and let's see what they're up to and see if we can loop them in.
Yeah. So, what are some of the factors when over your career that you said when you look at the relationships or the people that you're working with on shows, what are some characteristics of those individuals that you're you know what, I'm going to call that person in the future? Is it their skill sets? Is it their perspective? Is it their behavior? What are those for you?
I'm going to defer. I quote this endlessly. I'm going to quote it now. You could go into a lot of nuance and stuff here, but if you watch Neil Gaiman's commencement speech at my wife's alma mater, the U of Arts in Philly, he basically said, like this, ultimately it boils down to, is your work really good? Are you on time / consistent? And are you nice to be around? And the secret is you only need 2 of those 3. He said, like, you can be really, really nice and really talented, and it's okay if your stuff's late. You can be kind of a jerk, but if you're always on time and your stuff's good, they'll tolerate you. And if you're not that great, but you're always on time and nice, it's always lovely to hear from you. So it's I think it's like that's a little glib. It's a little like it's very broad, but I do believe it's ultimately like, are you a known quantity? What you don't want is someone who's going to surprise you in the middle of a project, in the middle of a show, a book, a stream series, or whatever it is. You want. And if you are an unpredictable creative type, if you're this little chaos gremlin, which is great in some circumstances, then it's like, I want to know that you're going to be a chaos gremlin. I've sometimes brought people on for their out there sensibility, and you get them in, and then their stuff is kind of flaccid or like just sort of inert, and you're like, well, damn, I wanted you to mix it up. I wanted you to shake things up a little bit. An editor I used to work with once, I kept bragging about him about like, oh, this guy's crazy, he's nuts. And he came in and it was good. It just wasn't quite what I was
just kind of cashing it in. They just like came in and just kind of ran through the motion
for whatever reasons, or maybe he just didn't have a POV. That happens too sometimes. So I think there's a lot to be said for consistency. I think there's a lot to be said of just be cool. Like I remember during, we're full disclosure, we've both been through the Amazon loop a few times. I remember in my most recent loop, somebody said, how do you manage like conflict in their team? And I said, listen, start with empathy and start with the idea that nobody wants to do a bad job. Everybody wants to do a good job. And just start with the fact that even if you see it very differently from them, they want the same thing you want. They want it to be good. And then just, you can kind of work backwards from there. Yeah, that's it. Well, I think that's what it comes down to.
I think those are 3 key factors, and I know we're going to get a clip of that as well and make sure it's in the show notes, just because I think that's a key factor. What you did highlight, though, was the concept of chaos gremlins, and I feel like a lot of our space, because a lot of businesses are built on individual empires, so it's them in their own space, creating on their own accord, doing what they do, and that's just how it is. Then further integrating them into the entertainment sphere is incredibly difficult. Because they're not learning how to play ball with others, or they may be fearful of how to play ball with others. Is there any tactics as an executive producer, as a showrunner, that you've employed to try to get them to understand the space a little bit? It's just like, okay, you're moving outside of your home base, and you're coming into ours now. We're playing together.
I'll give you an example. One of my very best friends is Gen X internet funny man. One of the first like pure comedy sites on the internet, Sean Baby. So SeanBaby.com. He used to write. So he's one of my very best friends. And he lived with me one summer because they brought him down to LA to write on an MTV animated series. It was an animated series executive produced by Orlando Jones, actually. And basically, they just loved his stuff, and they knew he was not a trained TV writer. They knew that, but they're like, we love his energy, we love his stuff, and he's what our more traditional, older writers' room is going to need. And they balance them out. Our mutual friend, Ify Nwadiwe, it's public now, but he's writing on that Twisted Metal. I think it's an animated series or live action. Yeah, so he's a writer in that. He's writing in that. And granted, he had written before for a lot of internet comedy stuff, but like, again, it's a TV writer's room. Ben Meckler, who was just recently on one of my shows, my former colleague at Legendary, he was a writer for Nerdist. He did a lot of comedy sketches in Nerdist. And then like, okay, now granted, these are different than like front of camera presenter types. Yeah. But I think what the lesson here is if you really love what somebody is, a smart executive producer from a traditional media would be like, I don't want to change that. I want to harness it and I want to protect it. And I'm going to do that by giving them a good team to work with. And setting them up for success. I think a lot of times the cynical view is, here's an on-camera talent that the kids seem to like. And so we'll put them on camera and see what they do. And, reading prompter is a very different thing. Hitting time cues and reading a timing sheet and knowing how to toss to a break, like all these little nuances with both scripted and unscripted. Who remember the Smosh movie? It's, what I mean? Like
there was a lot of those projects that people ran at because they just thought, okay, we got a popular person. This will sell tickets. Let's throw them into the model that we understand and kind of try to force that forward almost.
Yes.
And it never worked.
It never works. And I think the path that can work is saying, this is a great thing. It's got their finger on the pulse. Let's add them to an existing show first.
Yeah.
Let's bring them up. But also, like, it's an agreement of mutual benefit. It's like saying, okay, that's how I would do it, at least. Like, if I a big part of what I do is like with especially what we do at Crown is like, and what we did when you and I were together at Twitch is when I was there is okay, what's the person that's going to make sense for different audience types? Like, what's the person that as a more traditional linear TV viewer is going to make me feel comfortable? Because if the first thing I watch of Twitch is like Code Miko or Sushi Dragon, I'm like a Gen X person, I'm like, what is happening here?
And so highlight what those creators do. They do visual manipulation, typically using AR and stuff like that in their shows.
Exactly. And a lot of like real-time, like dynamic controls and VR streaming and things like that. VR streamers, that's out there, right? Or like our friends at Hyper RPG when they were doing Kolok, like it's when I'm seeing that happen, it's like, what is happening? But if you take those talents and then put them in set them up in formats where they can be themselves and still adhere to some of the rhythms of like traditional broadcast TV, I think that's something you can be that might work.
No, that's a key factor for sure, is ensuring that they're a part of the workflow from day one and figuring out how do we actually create the story together. It's a theatrical approach in the same way that we go into rehearsals or you name it, versus just show up on day one, here's your script and perform, because that just doesn't work for a lot of the talent, as we found. Now let's go back a little bit into the digital journey. So you transitioned from working Bunim, and then what was the start of your journey into, I guess, like the YouTube sector? Because that's really where we first like crossed paths.
So basically what happened was I was doing a lot of TV. So I came up as an editor in a lot of unscripted TV. I did a lot of the VH1 reality shows. I did everything. I did all 3 seasons of Flavor of Love. I did all 3 seasons of Rock of Love. I did Charm School. I was at that place for like 3 years.
What did you learn about love before you continue from watching those shows and working on those shows?
You really have to love that format to do it for 3 seasons.
You have to love that. No actual like relationship love is being found, but you have to love what you're doing.
I'll say this: the women on that first season of Flavor of Love, like the majority of them really did love him. Like they legitimately loved it. And then by season 3, it's very clear what's happening. No, listen, I did that, but I was a documentary filmmaker in my background. Like, my first film got distributed in college, and so I had that indie film run and gun, get things done approach. And so what I ended up, in between doing shows, I would find myself editing a lot of sizzle reels and development pitch reels and what are called proof of concepts. And basically, they would say, okay, go shoot some stuff. We're going to record some narration. You're going to take footage you shot and pull some clips from YouTube, and you're going to edit together 3 to 5 minutes. That's like an idea of like a show, so we can show it to develop. And I did that a lot. I did that at a lot of places. And so it's producer-editor combo called Predator, very unfortunately named.
Not something that people want to be called anymore in Hollywood.
There would like be legit job postings for, we're looking for a Predator. I'm like, well, you don't have to look far.
Not in this year.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that for a while, and then a company that I'd worked with before called BCII. They did a lot of automotive industry stuff, but they were trying to branch out. And so I had conversations with them, and they're like, why don't you come aboard as creative director? You can continue to do all the producing, editing, and development. And if any of these go to show, you can be early producer in a lot of those. And so it was cool because I got to do everything. I did industrials, I did instructional series, I did pilots and series for like style, every network imaginable, and then I got to also do some live sports. And I come from a martial arts background. My documentary was, I think, the second ever documentary about mixed martial arts ever made, or third maybe. It was
wow.
early. And so I had so I was producing live MMA. Plus, I used to, on the side, I used to tech direct like the World Jiu-Jitsu Championships like every couple of years. And so I was getting like this live sports background. Like I produced the first MMA on Fox ever. It was a show called Shark Fights. It was just an indie league out of Texas, and it was basically it was Fox testing the waters before they signed the UFC. So so I did that, and then I went back to freelancing. I didn't really like being 9 to 5 in that because it was less money, frankly. And then what happened was I was working on a talk show. I was working on Chelsea Handler. I was working specifically on Hello Ross, Ross Matthews' talk show. And one of my buddies there is this guy, Corrado, who's now the head of production over at IGN. And Corrado had done work over at Nerdist. And I'm like, I've got I was always pitching shows. I was always like pitching people on shows. And I pitched every network in town of my own creations and other stuff. And so I've been in a ton of rooms, and I'm like, put me in contact with Nerdist. Put me in contact with like them. I like what they do. And I'd go and I'd pitch through a revolving door of executives there, and the answer was always the same. Wow, this is great. We love it. We can't afford to make it because this is like the winding down of the MCN days. Like this is when YouTube is like, oh, maybe we shouldn't pour like molten money into a pit and never see it again.
Oh man,
there
was so much of that.
And so like they kept inviting me to parties and stuff, and they liked seeing me around, I guess. And then in early 2016, they were like, or no, late 2015, they were like, we're doing a new thing. Can you come in and talk to us about like his position to be like the live content producer for not just some of the Twitch stuff, but for this new streaming video platform they were creating at the time, called Alpha, which we could do 2 hours on that. But so I came in, and then the guy at Nerdist was leaving, Chris Michael, who spent time at Funny or Die after that.
Yeah, he was actually a colleague of mine early on. We used to share an office together.
Chris is great. I love Chris. And then he put me in touch with Annie Liu, who was the head of development at Geek and Sundry at the time. And so they had me on to do, they had me do 5 pilots in 3 weeks, I think, just to like put me through the gauntlet. And then it worked out, and they ended up hiring me. And then I was eventually promoted to head of live broadcast production over at Geek and Sundry. So our entire Twitch slate was something that was, we had teams specifically on like each kind of branch of it. So there was like the Alpha division, the Twitch division, and I was kind of like overseeing all of it before I burned out. And then and then that's kind of bounced around a bit, and then ultimately ended up at Twitch, where you and I officially became buds.
Yeah, exactly. So when you were, it sounded like you were producing just copious amounts of content during those years.
A lot of it.
And you said you eventually experienced burnout when it came to just producing so much work live. At that point, how many shows were you operating per week, if you were to guess?
So, I mean,
before that point.
And like, I mean, it was varying degrees of involvement, but technically by the end there, the whole slate was my responsibility. So if there was something, if something went wrong on any one of them, I had to have an answer why.
Wow.
And so like we had like Saxcar was running the majority of like the Twitch content when I was there, but he and I were working together and like working out talent deals and stuff like that. All in all, if you factor in all the hours, it was about 36 hours a week of live content.
There you go. Not counting the stuff of which you have to do for pre-production.
And developing the show. And like, so my basic flow of it was, if it was for Alpha, I would be hands-on for the first 4 or 5 episodes, and then I would hand it off. And then usually to either, Max James, who's now a Critical Role senior producer. He was the guy I hired at Legendary. I could not be more proud of that man. So him or Sax again. Sax did a lot of like the daytime Twitch exclusive content. But still, like in terms of like organizing the slate, putting together like the slate strategy, like what's best on Monday, what's best on Tuesday, what's best on like this. These were all things that I had to like figure out while I was there.
Yeah.
And take in a lot of different perspectives and KPIs and needs and things like
Oh,
that.
the wonders of corporation
Yeah.
jargon that I absolutely fucking hate when it comes to art. No, there's a thing you were saying when it came to the way that you were producing all of these different types of content over the year. Like you were coming into all these things, and a lot of people like to isolate themselves to one execution. Like they do one thing. You've done a lot when it comes to the spread and the types of content production. Like, how do you feel like the master of of a singular identity versus the jack of all trades? I guess, how do you feel about that when it comes to entertainment?
So I've had to think about this a lot because I've had to I had to make sense of it for myself. There's some realities. The realities is that I have a family that I support by doing what I do. So a lot of the decisions I made were what was available, like what was, and so like, was it a union job? Could I get like union benefits from it? When I got into producing, especially in the digital world, I very much aligned with the content we were making at Legendary at the time. It was, I mean, basically in 2015 I was editing Project Runway. I was working on a primetime NBC series as well. It was the pinnacle of my TV career, and I enjoyed the things I was working on, no doubt, and I enjoyed the people I was with. But I remember looking around one day and going like, it's never going to be better than this. It's never going to be better than this. Like I could work on better like the shows I had worked on, I could work on similar quality shows. And I didn't really have a strong desire to do scripted either. Like a lot of unscripted folks like want to do scripted content. I didn't really want to. I liked being a nonfiction storyteller. I liked that. I prided myself on that. And I just kind of realized, well, like, wow, like what's after this? And then I also realized the realities of just the way TV was going to go. The ad rates were never going to get higher. And once the ad rates on TV drop, then the budgets drop. Then it becomes like an arms race of like the biggest tent poles, and there's no like niche programming anymore. And so it's like, well, shit, if it's going to be that way, then I might as well work on stuff I really care about. So I was working on those shows and watching Tabletop, Critical Role. It was all these shows I was watching. And I was watching StarCraft 2 ESL finals. I was watching stuff that I just liked watching, know, and I'm like, you know what? If it's gonna be this way, then I want to do things that are challenges for me and give me creative fulfillment. So when I made the move, I took a financial hit for sure. But I was like, you know what? I have something to offer here because I speak this language of this kind of niche world that is a little bit insular, meaning there's not as many people like me who can have that live TV experience and bring it in.
Yeah.
But it was also me learning to let go of a lot of the things I learned in live TV. I had to learn to become a lot looser. I had to learn to become a lot more, almost going back to my indie film roots of just like, not just because of budgets, but because it made the content better.
Yeah.
The structure is great, but when structure turns into artifice, it can be, it inhibits connection. And I guess that's what it boiled down to me, John, was that like I was craving, like I loved movies growing up. I loved TV shows. I loved breathing it. I loved the feeling that a lot of those things gave me, and I wasn't feeling that in TV like I used to. And what I was seeing it happen in live interactive in these digital spaces, I was seeing love. I was seeing like real honest to God love, and that strong, I believe parasocial connections can be healthy if adjudicated properly. And I was seeing that, and I was like, okay, that's the frontier. That's like the big unknown, is how can we combine authentic connections with a sort of like a smooth, not glossy, but just like a smoother experience. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
I think when it comes down to it, like, because you start off with documentary film work, you obviously were going towards a purpose or a message of which you were hoping to achieve. Going into television, that's a very controlled message of which you're trying to achieve in terms of narrative, and that's probably what's also pulling away. When you're coming into our space, there is a bit of fluidity. There's, the positive moments are being expressed when you're having a rougher moment that's also coming in a very natural form. Is it the fact that there is no actual or controlled narrative for the most part in this space that allows you to actually find the narrative with your performers instead?
I like that it's recursive
Yeah.
to the community. So it's like it's as a creator, you're making something, the community is ingesting it, doing something with it. They're giving real time feedback. It's a conversation. I guess that's it. It's that it's a conversation, and there's value. Like at the end of the day, live interactive stuff is a moment economy, and like for me, it's like I like creating moments. I think about like the happiest moments in my life with my family and my other friends, and it all boils down to unique moments that we share together. And I feel like that direct connection is more likely to happen in digital than it is in TV these days, because TV is about mass audience.
Yeah.
And I kind of came up with this phrase out of nowhere at like 2 a.m. on a random Tuesday when I was at Legendary back in 2016. It was me and my friend Ben McShane. He was a producer on the Nerdist side, and we were talking. And it was right at that time when Critical Role was like, it was popular and it was known, but you could tell like it was swelling beyond like it was getting big. It was like it was getting really scary big, and like in a good way. But I had a moment where I realized, okay, there's the critter community, and it's not gonna be that one homogenous thing anymore. And I just said to Ben, I'm like, yeah, communities don't scale. And I kind of heard myself say it, and I'm like, and then I thought about that. I'm like, why did I say that? And then it kind of dawned on me that like they don't scale, they convert into audiences. I knew what audiences were, like from TV and movies. You know what audiences were. I know that when I made like art house documentaries that were like for a very rarefied era, I knew what that audience was, because that audience engagement is effectively a surface level engagement.
Yeah.
But like a community is like, when the show's not on the air, I'm doing something that's connecting with it. You know, it's like it's a difference between like science fiction fans and Star Trek fans. Like there's science fiction fans like, yeah, I'll read this, I'll read that, I love this, I love that. And then there's like Trek. No, it's like I'm a fan of Trek.
Yeah.
And that's like that's one thing, but it's another. And I saw this happen in real time. I saw it convert. Like, and I said to him, like, at some point the critter community is going to swell, and then just like a zygote dividing, it's going to just keep dividing, and now you have an audience with different cohorts is what you have.
Well, especially when you start to diversify your programming as an individual creator, producer, channel owner, you name it. That's probably the biggest difficulty when it comes to digital creators, because they think of their followership as just their fan base. That is my community, is that base. When really over time it just becomes a collective of disparate audiences that have different interests. Like I always say, a person walking in or like hitting the follow button or hitting like is like walking through a bar and you have that little ticker. It's like, okay, a person passed through the venue. You have that component. Then there's the people who come back on a regular basis to watch segments of programming. There was fans of my sketch content early era. There was fans of my Ogiku era. There was fans of the KawaiiGuy era. Those who enjoy this type of programming, which is where truly my heart is in just having conversations with people. But there's segments of the audience that are like, oh no, I'd much rather you play the cute anime game. And it's just that understanding and acceptance that is okay as an entertainment professional.
We used to have this film podcast I did with a bunch of buddies like 10 years ago. And one thing I always said is like, we talked about like, when we're making, what are we thinking of? And I'm like, I'm thinking about the audience member, how I fit into their life, and not just how, but when and where, because again, I grew up in, I was born in 78, which means I experienced TV with my family in the early 80s. And that was the last vestige of what we called 4-quadrant TV. The different audience quadrants. And like, that's why a show like the Cosby Show at the time was like the definitive, like mom, dad, sister, brother are going to sit down in front of one TV and experience the same content.
Yeah, that was Seinfeld for me.
Seinfeld for a lot of folks. I mean, MASH.
Yeah, MASH was another one. Yep.
MASH was a big one. Simpsons eventually, like Married with Children. Like these are all things that like everyone's going to sit down, they're going to watch this thing, and that's the audience mentality. We're going to make content that's going to as many eyeballs, as many different kind of eyeballs, which is what eventually leads to a very like homogenized experience.
Mm.
For your fans who want to see you play anime games, they don't just want you. There's something about their lives that needs that.
Yeah.
And for a while, you're going to fit that need in their life, and then over time, as you
It'll
change. Yeah, they'll find somebody else who fits that need in their life. And maybe that's all they're ever going to need, but maybe they're going to grow with you.
Yeah. And that's clear with the legacy followers of mine. Like, there's individuals who've been watching me for well over, you know, I've been doing this 16 years, well over 10 years, some of the people that are in chat. And so those are the ones who are willing to grow with. But I think you called out a good point where not every person is going to grow with you because they are also growing in their own space. They're going through their own life. They develop families, they develop relationships, and that will begin to bridge them in their particular direction. And it's at least acknowledging and celebrating the fact that they were there with you for a period of time. They were celebrating with you for a period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I moved around a lot, you know what I mean? And so every school year was like a different city for me.
Yeah.
And in order to just make connections with friends, I had to adopt whatever was going on there. So like I remember one year in fourth grade, I was living in Newport Beach, California.
Yeah.
And it was when Weird Al's Fat album came out.
Yeah.
And everybody, the whole school was into this album and loved it. And it was just like our thing. And then I moved to Rancho Cucamonga, California, which is about 2 hours inland and a very different kind of place than Newport Beach. And you know, there's no surfing here, so I'm screwed there.
Yeah.
But then also I go in like day one talking about Weird Al and they look at me like I'm just like farting in church. And you know what I mean? So like I had to adapt. I had to like, it's like, what are we into? Okay, well, I'm not into these 9 things, but I like this, so I can adapt and I can kind of be into this.
Did you ever force transform yourself for that community or these moves?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, full disclosure, I'm on the autism spectrum, so like I can mask pretty effectively. I can like. You know, it was very much like that was a moment where fate decided to weaponize my ASD. Yeah. So I was able to like, I was able to kind of like adapt as what I could and adapt speech patterns and like, and not even consciously. It's just something we do. It's just something we're always like doing that. And then you observe people and you watch their gait and how they walk. And a lot of it is like getting into the stuff that they're into. And what I think that has been beneficial for me is like, you know, I remember pitching my boss at one company. I'm like, no, I want to do a show at Meltdown Comics that's like Pawn Stars, but for like nerdy collectibles.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah. We shot it. That's how I met Sax. Sax was in my proof of concept that I shot for that. And so we did it. It was great. And my boss was like this very macho guy into cars and sports and fine, great, nothing wrong with that. But then I remember we go to this one display case at Meltdown, and they had this old-timey comic book that was all about cars called Cartoons. And holy shit, his face lit up when he saw that. And then he just started going. He just started going. I'm like, and afterwards, I'm like, you realize I've had that exact same conversation about TJ Hooker and Battlestar Galactica. You realize this, right? Like the exact way you talked about that is it's all fandom. That's all it is. It's all just, it's all otaku. It's all being just like deeply engaged with a thing. And if you're a creator and you're deeply engaged authentically with what you're doing, and as you grow and evolve, you know, your audience will see that authentic engagement. And I think that's, to tie it all the way back, if you want to transition from doing this kind of stuff to doing more traditional media, you got to find more traditional media that recognizes that authentic connection to the thing, to the people, and knows how to harness that smartly. I think you see it more in the podcast space than you do in like traditional TV. I think you see like, you know what I mean? So like I think as more big companies get into like, iHeartRadio and Gimlet and all these other companies, I think that's one way you can do it. And then if that works, then guess what? Your podcast can get adapted into a TV show, and then you're off to the races.
But I think it always comes down to that proof of the scale when it comes to traditional. Because like when it comes to niche fandoms and pocket segments and stuff like that across the board, there's a lot of hesitancy in the traditional space to take that risk. Unless there's proof. I think of like Critical Role, now it has, their show is on Amazon Prime. But I think of how many years people just reacted to them as, oh, they're just people playing a tabletop game.
Yeah, I mean, listen, any one of the people from that show will, because largely those larger media discussions were after my time there.
Yeah.
There were a few though. There was one where I remember talking to Matt and Marisha after they had met with like Legendary TV.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like, okay, so it's a game, but it's like like it's
hard to connect unless that person who is making the buying decision is a mutual fan of what you have.
Is a fan. Absolutely. There was I almost sold a very silly show to National Geographic of all places because there was one guy in there that got it. That just got it. And yeah, this is, you see this a lot in traditional media, like Clerks famously did a screening, like when it went to a film market with 3 people in the audience, and one of them just happened to be a guy at Miramax who just happened to get it. Like that's it. And it could have gone sideways a million different ways. That person doesn't show up, that movie never gets bought.
That's just the being present for the opportunity is effectively what I'm thinking through in that. It's just like knowing and having enough confidence to create what you want to make, understanding that there might be somebody who has an equal love to you of whatever that niche fandom is, but just making sure you put it out there, because the entire industry is mostly up to chance effect. It's like don't know who will be in the audience, or there's what was it? The someone in the crowd is the La La Land reference. It's just like, oh, someone in the crowd could be the one that breaks you. There could be just the fans that show up randomly on Twitch, and they're just like, that's the reason you're able to keep producing what you're producing.
But this like also goes back to like the right moment and like being able to translate it. Like I remember I spoke last November. I spoke at like this marketing conference thing, the LA office, and we were trying to explain. We're trying to explain Crown Channel specifically, but we also had to explain Twitch at the same time. And going before our presentation, like a lot of the people there were like, we want to understand Twitch, we want to understand the space, but we don't know if it's the right thing for us. We did a whole presentation, but one clip that we showed that was very powerful was about the Wendy's Fortnite integration. So that video was very good at like explaining the fact that like Wendy's wanted to do something, they did something on social, they participated authentically in the space and just did it and did something unique. I always go back to the Old Spice Nature Man from several years ago. These are like authentic, they're fun. They're just fun to participate in and be a part of. And it's kind of goofy with a big brand playing along. But it's also fun to participate in. It's lighthearted, and it's not beating me over the head trying to sell me something. It's just like, okay, cool. Let's create Wendy's in Fortnite. Let's have her smash all the frozen meat freezers in this like new pop-up
because they have fresh, never frozen beef, by the way. That's why they were doing it.
That's why they were doing it. And then you had like big streamers participating as well, and then like they counted how many freezers, and then Fortnite removed the freezers from the game, and then that's just a great, it's riding a wave. It's knowing like, okay, the wave's coming, I'm gonna start kicking, and here we go, and now we're riding it.
So when we're thinking about the moment, how do you maintain actual authenticity versus what KPIs or metrics or stuff people are trying to direct you towards? How are you able to argue for authenticity in the room now?
I'm very lucky that I'm on a team at Crown that all of us fundamentally get that it has to be an authentic connection and that it has to be earned. You can still Greg Daniels, who did the American version of The Office, when he was trying to get BJ Novak to come on board, he drew like a Venn diagram with a tiny center, and he said like on this circle is like the people who are comedy aficionados who like Fawlty Towers, who like Mr. Show, Kids in the Hall, all stuff. On this side are the people who like Seinfeld and like all the traditional like 3-camera sitcoms, and then in the center is shows that make both audiences happy, and that's where I want to live. And I feel like that's where I want to live, is that I want to do things. I want to do things that are shocking in how simple and straightforward they are. So like right now on Tuesdays, we have a show called Good at Stuff, which is just a crafting interview show that I do. We just talk to interesting people. Like you and I are talking together. We talk to people, but it's while they're making a DIY craft together.
Nice.
Because I'm a firm believer, you learn a lot about people while making stuff.
Absolutely.
And like our Thursday show Spotlight, we just literally have Cuppa Noodle and John Sandman. Like they just talk to streamers who are known but aren't huge. They're not Ninja, T1 level or anything like that. But they've got like a really strong following who will show up for them. And John and Cuppa talk about them. They show some clips from their stream. They laugh, they react. Then they have them on, they interview them, and then like the audience votes for who they liked, and then the winner gets to kind of like ramp out the show and kind of like land the show.
I love that.
And it's just it's a very simple, like that's the thing. And then we also do things like Kitchen League, right? Like we also do things like and we also do Ultimate Crown, and we also do like we recognize we need all of this stuff. We recognize that we need I'm a big believer, instead of like trying to create an audience first, I'm a big believer, and thankfully this is a vision shared by and this is like why I consider myself very lucky to be on this team, because like leadership gets that you build communities first, and then they kind of come together, and then out of these sort of like archipelagos of communities, you can create a larger identity.
Let's talk about community development on another level, and I know you're very vocal on Twitter about these types of communities that are attempting to form. Our wonderful non-fungible token communities that are continuing to just run rampant in the space. What are your baseline thoughts about NFTs in our creative sphere?
Views are my own. We'll start there. I would be very open to a digitized art patronage model that allowed someone to buy some because digital ownership, that's an honest conversation to be having.
Right? I mean, I'm thinking of my Apple TV. I have all my films that I was just watching Back to the Future on Apple TV, for example.
Right. So like, what does digital ownership get me, right? Because like, and so if I'm able to support an artist and create community that way, I think that would be great. What we've seen over and over and over again in these spaces is that the token that you're buying, which is supposed to represent art and creation and point of view, very quickly is nothing other than a speculative financial instrument. And listen, if you want to buy a speculative financial instrument, fine. Not my thing, but don't try to lie to me and say to me that it's supporting art or that it's supporting games. I shudder to think of it in the game space. I remember, like, I hear there's folks we know in this space who try to make the argument that, like, especially when it comes to games, that you put in all this hours and you create this custom armor and you make your horse all sparkly, and what do you have to show for it? Like with NFTs,
the stories that you had.
The experiences, the moments. Like, I
don't want to own my character from WoW, because that's the reminder I spent how many years.
Let's just say this, even if I could, I have zero interest in selling you a token of a picture of my first kiss. You know what I mean? That's for me.
Although, if it was offered, I'd be one of your first bids.
Well, thank you. No, but like, you get what I'm saying? There's we don't have to attach a monetary value to everything. We really don't. Money and finance is supposed to be utilitarian. It's supposed to be, I need a thing, I'm going to use this to get a thing from somebody who has.
Oh, you're upsetting capitalists all over the world right now with what you're saying.
I guess that's what I'm saying. It's I don't. At the end of the day, I ask myself the same question. And this also like counts for things like DAOs. It counts for things like, it's like, well, we could use a DAO to like track this. I'm like, or a Google spreadsheet. You could do those things too.
Because effectively, it effectively looks the same. It's like I'm looking at MySQL pages half the time.
It's a record keeping instrument. Cool. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, I mean, it's as Dan Olsen said in his brilliant Line Goes Up video, which if you haven't watched it, you should absolutely.
It's such a great video. I'll link it in the show notes so that way people can watch it.
But it's like, ultimately these things are products of low trust environments. Like it's a excessive amount of brute force work when no one trusts each other, and like that's what it boils down to. And like And that is not a good starting foot when it comes to art, which is allegedly what NFTs are supposed to be. This is to say nothing of the procedurally generated images that you see a lot of times. I've seen a couple NFTs. I've seen a couple artworks that have NFTs, I should say. But I've seen some artwork with NFTs. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool looking. It's clearly 90 layers of Photoshop with like different things toggled on and off.
Yeah.
But like, oh, that's fun. That's fine. And listen, if you like, if a person wants to do that, make that their little Twitter avatar with the little hexagon shape, okay, sure. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, what does it really get you? What is that experience? What is that moment? What is that thing? And I just don't know. I don't see it.
No, I don't personally see it either. There's actually a comment in the chat that's very interesting. This is coming from Sir Deadlock. Says, from what I've heard, the best case scenario of an NFT is a digital purchase that can be taken to multiple platforms and sold between users. Imagine buying a game on Steam, selling it to somebody on Epic. But there's also the issue with this exchange marketplace, because obviously people are shouting decentralization, with certain elements. You have to, use it on one service, and maybe you can transfer to another wallet, but not all the wallets are talking to one another. There's a lot of issues with it. So it's not actually decentralized. You have to go through central services to do that. But then there's the component of the concept of it's going into a reseller's market. Like, you're purchasing the art in most cases. Like, I think of like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which it's just effectively a bro club that I see happening with that group. And it's just like, oh, I'm purchasing this with the intent to sell to you at a higher amount.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, there's in legitimate, federally backed, massive financial institutions, there is still the ability to perpetrate fraud and deception. Okay, so let's decentralize that, and let's make an amend-only contract system, or coding system, the mechanism with which we do this. And it's touched on in that video, but it's the thing that scares the hell out of me, which is a lot of the NFTs currently are amend only, meaning I can, and they're NFTs, they have packets, so they have code packets, right? So there's nothing if you and I had a wallet or an exchange right now, there's nothing stopping me from giving you an NFT that you do not want.
Correct.
And the second you open it, does all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And
we've seen that happen. Yeah.
We've seen it happen. Like, that's how big name rappers like lose half their, that's how Seth Green lost his stuff. That's how like his like, and there's no solution. The only solution is to do what's called a fork, which is to, like, when Ethereum got almost completely liquidated and bankrupted, they had to fork it. They had to go in and manually brute force override it, and that effectively created two chains: Ethereum Classic and most Ethereum. And the same thing with NFTs is there's again, Dan Olson says, like, dick pics are a thing that they're just waiting on the horizon. Yeah, just like NFTs of horrific imagery that's going to get dropped in people's wallets. Yeah, like, you can see it on the horizon.
Oh, I mean, we've already seen instances of this. There was an awful NFT collection that was literally just the faces of black people. Yeah. And it was a purchasable asset. Like, that is the fucked up aspect of what I'm seeing the space become. Yeah. And so there's obviously bad actors in the space who are operating within it. There are distrustful individuals, because there's people who announce, oh, I'm forming a community, invest in the community, do these things, and then disappear.
And then it gets rugged. It gets a rug pull, like, not even 3 months later. Yeah, it's insane.
So I feel like that's a constant aspect, and it's worrisome, because at the core of it, and I think this is what you just highlighted a moment ago, is like, it's the attribution that art has an applied value, and that is effectively the only purpose of the art. Really, is what people are focused on. Yeah, I will own this shitty JPEG that was automatically created using Microsoft software, and I know it looks bad, but it's worth $300,000 because I said so, or somebody said
because I said so. Like, somebody recently, there's a recent article that just came out that said there's actually not that much money in crypto. Like,
yeah, I saw that,
which is true. So, like, and the person made a good point. Like, there's nothing stopping you or I right now from forming a corporation and generating, let's say, 100 shares and valuing each share at $10 million, and then I buy a share from myself for $10 million. And guess what? I've just inflated the the projected worth of that corporation to whatever, $100 million, whatever it is.
Yep.
And like, so that's the thing you could do. But the thing is, we have regulatory bodies who would look at that and an open market where there's actual real competition, and nobody would, if I could convince somebody to buy it for $10 million, great, cool. If that's my end goal, sure.
Yeah.
Shell, like hollow shell companies are a thing. They're less and less successful as scams these days, but that is effectively what like most crypto trading is these days. Is here's an asset, we have a lot of high velocity trades and a lot of sells, and then therefore it's worth this, but the actual liquid money in the pool is a fraction, is like 10% of what they say it is.
And a lot of the arguments for the protection of it is, well, this is the future of the internet. This is Web3, even though there's no like form definition for what is actually Web3. I guess
it's a future. It's certainly a
future.
Well,
of course, yeah, we're going in a direction. Obviously, we're all moving into the future. Well, some of us are moving into the future. I think there's other aspects of the country we're trying to move into the past, but we're moving collectively at least forward in time. And so if we're doing that, obviously that's going to be one path. Okay, we believe in the decentralization, or at least this is a concept or proof of concept tokens, whatever it is. When it comes to content, I'm just curious your thoughts. What do you think this space, or at least the space that we're operating within, is going to look like, let's say, 10 years from now? We're now in the year 2032. What is this space going to feel like? NFTs aside, because I feel like that could just...
Right. Yeah, that's, I'm like, wait, what are we talking about here? Yeah. I think what we're going to see is... we're going to see more and more. The reality from a physical infrastructure point is that not every region has access to high-speed internet in the same so cable TV is not going to go away. I think what you're going to see more and more is a blending and an integration of channels on OTT platforms, and then OTT platform content in like one digestible spot.
Yep.
So whether that's like a Pluto TV.
Oh, I love Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto's great.
Yeah.
But I remember meeting with those guys back in like 2016.
Yeah.
And like, this is really smart. Like just a bunch of, like a hybrid internet TV content in an ad supported environment based purely on like a single internet connection. Like that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see more things like that, a bit more of a two-way street. I think that we're going to see more local sports and local news integrated into OTT platforms. And then I think in terms of creators and how they exist shoulder to shoulder with this stuff, I think you're going to see more and more streamer hosts getting more and more show opportunities. I think you said 5 years, right? So like
10. So 10 years from now.
10. Okay. Yeah, 10 years definitely. I think you're going to see on one level like more things like award shows for our type of work.
Yeah.
On like mixed in with like regular, like at least as big as the Tonys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I think you're going to see things like that. I think you're going to see I think someone, and it may or may not be Twitch, but I think someone is going to really innovate in some tools when it comes to like real live two-way interaction and a way that nobody's really thinking of. And I think that'll happen in 5 years. And I think in another 5 years, it'll happen. Like we'll see it like a buzzy adoption rate of that.
Yeah.
I think you're also going to see more. I think you're going to see people making more content for mobile. Like Quibi was wrong in so many ways. It wasn't wrong in the way that like, okay, how can you do like bespoke content for mobile that doesn't feel like scaled down TV?
Well, I think it was also a matter of the moment, because obviously it was entering into quarantine and nobody was traveling. And so we were all stuck at home. So I think there's aspects of that.
Definitely. But here's what I think. Because I had a lot of friends working. I worked on a Quibi thing.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends working on a Quibi thing. And like Katzenberg said at the time, right when it launched, I'll never forget it. He said, I've never worked at a place where I lost where the content was good. So his whole thing was like, he firmly believed the content he was making was very, very good, and therefore, by hook or by crook, it would win. And I would say to John, and I would say to everybody, is that you can have the best content in the world and in the wrong moment for that content to be viewed. And the reality is, if there's content I only want to experience on my phone. There's content I only want to experience on my desktop.
Yep.
And there's content I only want to experience in my living room.
Yeah.
Like, if I have to watch Westworld on my phone because my daughter won't fall asleep and have to lay in her bed while I'm watching Westworld, I will.
Yeah.
I'd much rather watch it in my living room with, like, you know, stress eating nachos. Like, that's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so I think what we're going to see is more and more content that's like, we're going to see more IP development that has branches customized for each spoke of the wheel. I think we're going to see, like, name any show that's on digital right now. Name anything. I think you're going to see the main show here on a screen. You're going to see an adaptation narratively on the big screen. You're going to see other kind of content here.
Yeah.
And I think creators are going to get hip to that. And I think creators are going to get smart about franchising their own content in really exciting ways that take advantage of each experience and understand this is what it's going to be here, and this is what's going to be here, and this is what's going to be here.
I really like what you hit on at the end there in regards to franchising content, and I think that's something of which, once again, a lot of creators currently operate within singular portal, singular destination. That's how they distribute, and they're not really thinking about, okay, what's the next screen experience? What is the traditional screen experience? What is, you know, how would I translate my idea of the world of which I'm building to a larger stage, a live stage, a theatrical production, Broadway show, whatever it is. It's really starting to get to think, okay, well, the world is continuing to evolve. People want to absorb content in different ways. How are you going to provide for that if you're willing to to expand? So I think the franchise aspect is a really good point. Which, yeah, we were talking about Critical Role earlier. There's now a Clue game for Critical Role. I saw it just came out. So it's like,
it's crazy.
Merchandising, baby. The old yogurt coming back and saying, you know, Spaceballs the flamethrower. You know, kids love this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, they learned early on with their live events and their merch. Like the merch was like the big first, like, canary in the coal mine. Like when I was there when, like, the socks sold out and like, I think I was there for what, maybe not the first, but like there was like a batch where we made 500 the dice. We made 500 dice and they sold out in like 3 minutes. Yep. And like that was like the first inkling. And so it's like, okay, cool. How can we? And they're so uniquely positioned because now I think them opening their own games company is the best thing in the world. It's because huge. And the fact that they're making games that aren't just like D&D light, they're making, you know, very simple tabletop games, and they're making, like, you know, obviously their source books, but they understand that Critical Role is about, you know, a bunch of buds at a table, and so they're creating experiences where you can get your own buds at a table. So I always talk about this notion of interactivity. I consider two things: synchronous and asynchronous. And synchronous interactivity is what your chat room is doing right now. They're talking to us and reacting to the content. Periodically, we can look at the screen and go, "Hey, thank you, Sir Deadlock." You know, we can have that two-way street. Asynchronous activity is like fan art. It's like taking the products and engaging with them, making your own stuff out of it. Like that when the show's not on the air, when the stream isn't live, like, what, I'm still interacting with you. Yeah. You know, and especially through things like fan creations, I can send them to you and you can see them just like almost like in a time travel sort of way. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. So it's getting a lot of creators to really think about those two modes of distribution, access, connectivity with the communities of which you're building, understanding that your community has and will become over time a collective of different disparate audiences. Which ones do you service heavier? Which ones are your ticket buyers? Which ones are the ones that are, you know, will show up if you offer to buy them the drink? You know, there's all these different things that you have to think about as a creator, but as we're going forward, especially into the coming years in the space, being very mindful towards, there will always be another app. There will always be another distribution service. There will always be another mode of creation, or as the industry tried to push you towards things. I remember when they were trying to push us towards 3D film production there for a while. It was just like 3D is the future, 3D, 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 3D. I experimented with 3D cameras and I'm like, this shit's bullshit. I'm not playing with this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing: there are use cases for it, and if you ask Hector Navarro, it's still the best thing ever.
Oh yeah, Cameron, James Cameron will sing his praises.
And like, and sure, okay, like, and here's the thing, maybe there is the perfect use case that will make me buy that 3D ticket, right? And I guess that's the thing, is that like a lot of times I see this so many times with media companies like trying to participate on Twitch, is that they're like, okay, what kind of poll should we do? What kind of like that? Like, here's, oh my god, I'm gonna vent for a second.
Oh, here we go.
Every person, every executive, every like storyteller from the traditional media world who comes to Twitch with anything resembling a little bit of money, the first thing they go to is choose your own adventure narrative storyline sold on Twitch. I've seen that done I don't know how many times, of like they do different versions.
Are they thinking of it like was it Bandersnatch? Like that type of experience?
Yes, Bandersnatch, whether it's Bandersnatch or like there, I mean, that's the choose your own adventure like thing is, I click this and I'm going to directly affect the story, and we're going to pull this and the story will change.
Got it.
Everybody plays in that sandbox, and the reason why you can't remember any of them is because none of them make any noise. And like, and I'm not counting fun like one-off experiments that like people do. There's Hyper did one. There's a few that are just like, hey, let's do this for fun. But there are people who are like, no, this is going to be a hit. And it never is. It never is, because like audiences don't care. Like even with Bandersnatch, the Black Mirror brand got that to a certain point.
Oh no, that's true. Yeah.
But it wasn't like people weren't asking for more Bandersnatch. You know what I mean?
The story was forgettable. I just remember it being associated with Black Mirror and being a dark journey for the one time.
Yeah, the problem with Choose Your Own Adventure storylines is you can get wildly inconsistent storylines. And Choose Your Own Adventure books, which were fun, they're fun to do because like, oh, I died. Okay, I'll go back to this page and like see, and then I've completed the book, but let me just go through and see all the alternate endings. Like, it's a thing you can hold in your hands and access very quickly. Yeah. But like watching a show, it's like, I'm curious, how would this have ended? Now I got to sit through an additional 10, 15 minutes of seeing that again. And it's just like, it doesn't feel nearly as special as it sounds on paper. Yeah. And like, that's, I think, like a glowing misconception of like the technology not being suited for the content.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also a misinterpretation of what interactivity means, because immediately they're just like, okay, that's what I have to do. Not necessarily. There could be other ways that you can utilize the interactivity components of Twitch, of a unique extension of the chat room, actually involving the audience in a meaningful manner that could be as easy as, any show of Rocky Horror with a live performance where I'll be singing, just shout the responses in the chat. It's the same thing of like going to a K-pop concert or something like that. There's other ways to achieve interactivity that have already been replicated in the traditional circuit. You don't need to really try innovation all that much to find a success moment.
What I love about Twitch so much is like, I like, to me, it always feels great when you're providing moments and then a side conversation breaks out amongst multiple users in chat.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we did this show on Crown that came up called Simulation Mode for Age of Empires. And for the release of Age of Empires 4, I got 4 medieval combat specialists to put on armor. And we tailored their armor and materials to look like the in-game models. And we had a Joan of Arc. And so she came out and she was talking about her weapon loadout and everything. And a whole debate amongst people either from Canada or from France or of French origin, like had a whole debate over the import of the legend of Joan of Arc or Jeanne d'Arc in like real history. And like I remember like watching the show and like, I was on set, but I had a chat monitor open and chat was just popping. And I'm like, what's going on? I look down and it's these paragraph long, discourses that were happening parallel to the show. And I guess I think that's the fundamental thing a lot of people don't understand from like the traditional media world is like giving the fodder for people to have their own experience.
Yes.
Separate of what you're doing. But like you're the concert venue and people in the audience are going to have their own conversations. They're going to have their own thing going.
Yes.
And that's good. That's good. That's a good thing to have, because that's what people are going to remember and take with them and remember about your brand or whatever is the moment you provided for them and the space you provided for them to feel those things.
Yeah, it's because I think that's what forms the actual memories that connect with whatever media you're consuming. I think of when I play, what was it? I think it was around the same time the Spice Girls album came out, their first one. At the same time, the Super Mario 64 came out, and I
Yes.
remember sitting, playing Super Mario 64, and that music is now directly tied to that memory for me. Or there was one time I went to the theater and we were watching a musical perform, and somebody broke wind in our general vicinity, and you could just see all the patrons in this immediate vicinity. Like, we're watching Glenda the Good Witch sing, and I'm just like, fuck, that smells awful. And we're all like chuckling to ourselves. I'm like, that's the memory that sticks with you because it's what's happening within the audience around you. And to enable those things to happen is not a bad thing.
Not at all.
I mean, the smell was bad, but you know what? It created a fun memory for all of us. Like, remember the time when Glinda was hitting high notes and wind was breaking? So it's just, I think those are the joys that we just, hopefully over time, traditional control, the desire. I mean, hell, that's like even Carnegie Mellon, they taught me, it's just like, as soon, you have to always have to make sure their eye is on the basketball if you're creating something. So it's just like, always make sure you're maintaining their focus. If they look at their watch, you've lost them. And I'm like, if they look away for a moment, I don't think I've lost them entirely. Now, if they get up and leave, okay, well, I haven't maintained a show for them. But if you look away, it's okay. That's a human.
There's actually two Coachella documentaries. There's one that came out a couple of years ago, but then there's the original one that came out in like 2007, I want to say.
Yeah.
And I bought it. And in that one, because I went to the first 5 or 6 Coachellas, I want to say.
Yeah.
And they were interviewing Wayne Coyne from Flaming Lips. And he said, you don't buy a ticket to Coachella to see Flaming Lips or Air or Queens of Stone Age play like their latest set. You don't do it to see. You don't do it to see us play. Just us play. You don't do that. You do it because you know it's a 3-hour road trip, and you know your friend is going to lock the keys in the car, and then you have to wait for the tow truck company, and then you got to run to the gate, and then you got to like get inside, and then you got to like get water, and then you're dancing, and then you have to move over here, and you take a little nap. Like all these little crazy things that can only happen at a festival happen, and that's what you're buying. You're buying a ticket where you're creating your own magic. You're creating your own weird hero's journey of the adventures of you and your friend. You're buying the ability to participate in a narrative. And I was thinking that. I was thinking about when it comes to anything live. I like, what experience am I creating for somebody? You know, what experience am I creating for, you know, what's the day like? Like, I'm a big believer in natural light on streams. I'm a big believer in like watching the sun shift over 2.5 hours. I'm a big believer in like anchoring this to a time and a place.
Yes.
A
time and place that will never happen again, because that's the value of being present in a live space. It's also, I mean, that's why I got back into live after years of the YouTube circuit. That felt like dead content to me. Even though it generated the big bucks and all this stuff, I was just like, this feels dead.
I'm just using an example, but like Philip DeFranco, when he does his little news updates, like his room is windowless, the lighting's always the same, he always looks the same, he has not aged a day. It's weird. He's just he's always there. And if he, what up, you beautiful people, and like he does the Philip DeFranco, Philly D voice, and then like if there's so much news that's happened, you could show me a random news thing from him and I would not be able to tell you when he made that.
Correct.
At all. I wouldn't be like, unless I knew exactly when that news story happened, I'm like, I wouldn't know. And I understand why that's advantageous from a lot of angles, but like, to me, like I remember when we were building the set for Good at Stuff, there's these windows and it's in Seattle. I'm like, no, like I want it to rain. I want to hear the rain outside. I want to see the sun when it pokes through. I want to see this stuff as it happens. Like I want to root this moment. So
I mean, that's effectively what makes it disposable content in most cases. But that's what that system is built on. But then once again, that's a whole nother 2 hours. But I just want to say this has been a hell of a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you were able to come on the show. I hope our listeners and our viewers were able to parse just these key thoughts that we should be thinking about when it comes to entertainment, where it can be going, how we should be approaching the space, really being mindful of the audiences that we're bringing into it, and how we can take them forward. Once again, I want you to shout out like all the programming you're working on. Where can people catch your shows and times and all that?
Not just me, but we've got a great team of showrunners. There's about 5 others of me who do what we do over at twitch.tv/Crown. If you go to YouTube Crown Channel, you can find us, Crown Channel on all the socials. And yeah, we're live 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday in our regular programming. And then you can see a lot of our cool big events that we have. We're really trying to build out our YouTube side. We've, this year we're really focusing on like a VOD destination. So
nice.
Obviously you can check out Ultimate Crown. You can check out clips from all the shows, and TikTok. We're looking at building out our TikTok presence as well. And you can see, you'll be able to see us and find us everywhere you can view content.
Awesome. So we're going to be seeing you doing all those sweet TikTok dances sooner than later. We'll be. Oh.
Yeah, I wish I had the courage for that, man. I really do.
Well, there is a fair amount of martial arts on TikTok I've been coming across, so maybe we can get you to
There
showcase
is.
some of those skills.
There is. I have opinions, but yes.
Oh,
there's
that's
definitely a lot more sort of content on TikTok.
That's
for sure.
fine. I appreciate you being on here, and all of our listeners and our viewers. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great today and an even better tomorrow. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.